pjnet.tv, 9:30 East Coast time here in the United States. And we have first-time guest number 296 standing by in our green room. We are running our bumper. We are streaming. We are recording. We have a chat room eager to hear somebody other than me. So let's count it down to Studio 8, starting now. Well, welcome or welcome back to pjnet.tv. I'm your host, Coach Prasick, and I have the greatest job and ministry in the whole wide world, I believe, because I get to sit here night after night, and we're about to introduce first-time guest number 296 on our program. We've had more programs than that, but some people have been here more than once. And I think you're going to find that when you hear and see our guest, and I'll put her name on the screen so I won't mispronounce it, Derinda Babcock, is a multi-talented, interesting person who I only recently got to know. We actually had a chance to talk earlier than you were scheduled to appear. A lot of times I only talk to somebody because they are a guest and we're arranging it. But Deb Haggerty at Elk Lake gave me your name, and I found out that you've got a lot to do with that, the success of that outfit, Elk Lake Publishing. But it's not the name you always see on the front end. Tell us about your involvement with Elk Lake Publishing, Derinda.
Well, I had some books with Elk Lake before Deb bought it. And so Deb asked if I wanted to keep my books with her, and I did. So at my first introduction to Elk Lake, I was one of her authors. But then somehow in one of the conversations we had, she said, "Do you know how to use Adobe InDesign?" At that time, I was going for my fourth degree program, which was an Associate of Science in Digital Media Arts and Design. And I said, I use InDesign and Photoshop every day. So I sent her my unfinished portfolio, and the next email said, "Do you want a job?" I said, "Doing what?" She said, "Designing book covers, formatting interiors, and making ebooks for our authors." I said, "Well, that's what I went to school for. I don't need the fourth degree, but I wanted the information." So she said, "Okay, here's a contract." So I started, after the author role, I started as her senior graphics designer. And since I started working with her in May of 2017, between the few freelance projects I do and all of her books, I will be up to about 600 books by the end of November. And it's just been fun. And then after that, she asked me, since I taught for 25 years in public education as an English as a second language teacher, as well as a certified reading specialist, I would give her suggestions when she would say, "What do you think about this proposal for this children's book?" And I would look at different things and give her my honest opinion. And after that, she said, "How about you become my managing editor for picture books?" Right now, with my schedule, I'm not editing chapter books in middle grades, but I am editing all of the picture books that Elk Lake has. So that keeps me busy between that and my real life jobs.
I would say you're busy. And, well, where do I start? I don't want to get into the weeds of the mechanics of illustration, digital creation, but I am in that business. And I don't do what you do. I couldn't do it. I don't have the artistic skill that is required, or the artistic inclination, which leads to the skill. But I am familiar with the complexity. And I think when people, a theme that I hear often is, God told me, inspired me to write this book. And then as they take steps down this road, they find out they need to get a publisher, and Well, one of the hurdles is a publisher is about to make a significant investment in a book, and among those investments, usually, is the illustration. But Elk Lake has illustrations, but they use a different model sometimes.
Well, when you speak of illustrations, most of the books we have are not illustrated. They are composited with stock photos. So middle grade books tend to be illustrated sometimes, but we don't have an illustrator on staff, though we do have a couple of talented freelancers who sometimes agree to work with us if illustrations are needed. But most of the books that are illustrated are picture books. And picture book authors find the illustrators that they need with the right style, and then I work with those illustrators. But as far as most of the covers that we have for our fiction and nonfiction lines, they're composited with stock images. So it's a multi-layer process in Photoshop to get the right, for most of the covers. The historicals tend to require several more images than some of the contemporaries do.
Oh,
It is a process of just compositing stock photos.
well, and the complexity is one, you have to layer it, which that's for people like yourself, that's not the big deal. But to blend those layers together is another. But when people see a book cover, for example, they see an appealing picture that, of course, draws them to, to the book, but they don't see the detail. What is the typical number of layers involved in a book cover of that type?
Well, often it depends on the genre of fiction. If it's young adult fantasy, they typically use between 5 to 7 images and maybe 15 to 20 layers with adjustment layers or masks or whatever. And sometimes the historicals need about 7 images, 6 to 7 images, and then they'll have adjustment layers and masks, which means nothing to anyone who doesn't know Photoshop or layering or any kind of image editing.
Well, you've got to blend them together, folks. The images
Yes.
have to be masked, which means the part you see is actually a small part of a larger image. Then you have to make the rest of it transparent so that whatever is behind it shows through. It's a. Do you see it as tedious?
I enjoy it too much for it to be tedious.
I
It's
saw
always
that
a
coming.
challenge. And that's the really fun part about doing these covers. I can't get in the habit of designing certain kinds of covers the same way every time because we have many, many different kinds of books, different genres, nonfiction, and they all require new things. So even though some of the strategies and approaches may be the same, it's always a new project for me. So it's always a new challenge. And work can be tedious, but the design work never seems that way to me because I like it too much.
Here's a challenge I have. Tell me if you face similar challenges. I have to get totally immersed when I get doing this work. And like yourself, I don't consider it tedious. I consider it challenging. I have often walked outside. To my surprise, the sun has come up. But I can't manage multiple projects. I have to just get immersed in one until it's complete. But of course, if you're trying to make a living doing this, clients don't always agree to stand in line in serial order. I'll start yours as soon as I finish the one I'm working on. How do you manage that?
Well, because Elk Lake publishes many books per month, if I'm doing the cover instead of one of the designers that we have, often I will have 3 to 5 projects going at the same time. But it's just like my writing. When I'm writing books, Sometimes I may need a mental break from the scene I'm writing for one book, and I may just flip over to two other books and start writing from there. And I try and just rotate around through them because it keeps me fresh and doesn't let me get into a slump. So, with the number of books we have to put out each month, I don't have time to necessarily work one at a time because each of the books are in a different place. But if they are where they need a cover, they're getting close to publication. And so I'm just working with Deb and some of the managing editors to try and make sure that I get the books out in time. So I don't work one project at a time, which is probably frustrating to some of the authors. And where's my cover? Where is it? And, I may be waiting for some pieces of information, but I will get to them and their books will be published. So, yeah, I always have more than one project going at a time.
How much collaboration do you have when working with a client? Do you just say, "Leave me alone, I'll show you the finished product," or are they actively involved in the process along the way?
Well, for both my freelance clients and the contracted authors with Elk Lake, we like to give them input as to what do you envision for this. And we have a whole range of authors who will say, I am not a designer. I have no clue. I just know here's what my story's about. I'll ask, what's the main conflict? What's in your mind the most important location? What are these characters' faces looking like? Because we have to engage readers in 3 seconds or less, and they'll decide whether they want to look at the back cover to find out what the book's about if they're in a brick and mortar store, or click on the look inside if they're online. So the cover has to grab them. They have to have a lot of information in 3 seconds. They have to have, what's the genre? What is this, romance? Is it contemporary? Is it sci-fi? Is it YA? What is it? And what's going on in the picture that's going to grab them to where they'll look at the back cover? So for the Elk Lake authors that are contracted, Deb sends them a packet of information, and one of the forms in there that they fill out is a cover request form. And they are asked several questions, and I will look at that when it gets closer to time to design their covers. But I do basically the same thing with the freelance projects. I talk to the author and say, what do you envision for this? What is the book about? What's the most important piece? And then I have them help me out by going to our paid stock site and looking for images that might work. And one of the things that I tell all of them is the lighting is critical. If I am going to composite 5 or 6 images, you must have the light coming from the same side and taken about the same time of day, or else the composite isn't very credible. So they get part of the process there. And then just like at Elk Lake, you get 3 cover concepts, different cover concepts if you need them. Sometimes we get it right the first time. And so they're seeing draft covers that are low resolution images and are watermarked. And then once we get the right image, we purchase the high resolution images and start finessing the fonts and the colors and those kinds of things to get the final cover. But I do that for the freelance customers also.
3 seconds. That long, huh?
Okay.
3 seconds.
Or less.
Or less. Here is one example of an award-winning work. And we put it up here, one, to commend you and for your involvement in this, but give us the anatomy of, the behind the scenes. We see it this way, but you know there's a lot more to it. Give us the anatomy of what goes into this book cover.
Well, again, I look at what the author requests and look at the image samples. And if I look at an image that they've provided and I say, that one, there's just this gut level connection that says that would get my attention. And so it basically is the same process. Once we see these images that the authors say, I really like this, or here's what we're trying to go for, here's what I want, we look for them. And then once we find one, we'll put them in that, it's just a rough draft.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll say, what do you think of this? And the author will give feedback. Well, I don't like a sans serif font. I want a serif font, and I'd like to have more of a scripted font here. And if we can find things that work well with the images, we put them on there. And sometimes there will be adjustment layers to change the color of the sky. We may even have to replace the sky with another sky that would work better. And it's just fine tuning the image, the high resolution image. And then what I do with this is, after I create it in Photoshop as a certain kind of file, it's called an RGB file, which means red, green, blue. And it is appropriate for web and for things like that. But then I convert it, once we have it, to a CMYK, which is a 4-color process of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And then I import, I'll create the back cover from the front cover usually. And then I will place those JPEGs in an InDesign document that has 3 pages pushed together. So I have the front cover, the spine, and the back cover. Yeah. And then I lay in those images and overlay the text on the back cover, author's bio, author headshot, spine text. And then once Deb has formatted the interior, and I know how many finished interior pages we have, I get the trade template first to see exactly how wide the spine needs to be. And then I adjust the spine and embed all of the text, and that's the file that we upload to either Lightning Source, the trade distributor, or KDP Amazon.
I get it. Well, thanks for the behind the scenes. There's so much, and some of the things you were referring to I'm familiar with, and some I'm not. Before I get to your book, you are teaching ESL, English as a Second Language, and a lot of times when I hear people are teaching English as a second language, those people are in like South Korea or somewhere like that. You're in Colorado. Who are you teaching to?
Well, I taught for 25 years. I retired in June of 2013, even though I'm teaching online, and the boys I teach online are English only students. But where I worked in Durango, Colorado, the world came to me. I had student war refugees from Bosnia and Herzegovina several years ago. I had a lot of Navajo speakers, definitely Spanish speakers from Mexico, Portuguese speakers, a lot of kids from China and Japan or Korea, South Korea. I had one from Uzbekistan. You know, they would just come to Durango for different reasons. Some were foreign exchange students that really didn't have as much English speaking skills and listening skills as they could. So sometimes they would be in my class for support.
It's not that I know that many, but I've been involved in missionary work overseas. Most of the ESL teachers had to learn the indigenous language of the people that they're teaching. Based on what you just said, I can't fathom that you know that many languages.
No, when you teach English as a second language, you learn strategies for how do you deal with students when you're trying to teach them academic English. What are the processes? What are known strategies supported by research that help them learn a language even if you don't understand it? I have my state endorsement in Spanish, so the Spanish speakers were not an issue, neither were the Navajo speakers, because I grew up in a Navajo-speaking area. But when I would get the kids from Bosnia and Herzegovina or some of the Asian countries, I just utilized a lot of techniques that I knew made sense and were supported by what they call sheltered English strategies. And a lot of times it modeling for them, it's showing them, it's connecting what you're saying with something that you're doing so they get the connection between your actions and the words. I'd also taken American Sign Language classes, and that was wonderful for showing them if I meant stand up or stand, I could just put my fingers up and show them stand and then model for them, or sit or do things. So I often integrated American Sign Language signs in with the spoken word and the actions. And they catch on pretty quickly doing that. And then it's just a progression. But a lot of times it's strategy and giving them comprehensible input so they understand what you want them to do.
Derinda, you have so much. Would you like to talk about your work? You actually don't just serve others. You actually have a ministry, an art, a craft of your own. This is book 2.
I do, and the Vindorans is book 2 in A Tale of Three Kingdoms. And this whole series has been so fun to write because it's based on the question, what would a culture look like if travelers, Christian soldiers surviving a nuclear war, found a way to travel back into time, and they decided to go to around the middle 14th century? What would they take with them, knowing there's no plastics, there's no electronics, there's nothing like that? So what would they take with them? How would they survive? And then, more importantly, is how would their appearance change how they interacted with people around them? Or how would they set up their culture to maybe avoid what was coming in the future? And how would that look like 4 generations later when they're interacting with the cultures around them and the languages around them? So book 1 is the Gendentors. And then the main character from that book is now also the main character in the Vindorans. And I listened to Warren talk about the history piece of it. And even with these kinds of books, I do a lot of research for every book I write, a lot of research. I enjoy historical research. I enjoy all of that. So you'll see pieces there. And so it's been a really fun book. And book 3 is supposed to come out in February if I can get the manuscript to my editor by August 1st. So that's what I'm working on now.
I'm surprised you had time to be on this program if you're looking at an August 1st deadline. Maybe you're not the procrastinator that typifies the people I work with.
Well, I sit down, and after I'm working in my garden, taking care of our animals and doing all of that, say, I have to write, or I have to get these projects done for Deb because I have to write. This has to go in. So you sit down and you make yourself do it. But I do a lot of writing in my head. So when I sit down to write, it just comes out.
Okay. Are you like me, a nocturnal vampire night owl type, or are you a day person?
No, I can't stay up beyond 10 o'clock most of the time. And so we get up so early.
Behind me.
Yeah, it is. So we get up pretty early. We're geographically isolated in southwestern Colorado, and we have animals and small ranch we have to take care of, and a lot of things we have to do. So you can't procrastinate, but I usually work mid-morning, mid-afternoon, till about bedtime.
Well, Derinda, I'm something that the people watching don't know is that the entire time, or at least when we spoke earlier today, there was significant risk that this may not happen because you are in a rather remote area, and you are having some weather phenomenon out there that would compromise or at least threaten your ability to be on our program tonight. Did the weather clear up and is all well?
It did, and this is a time of year that we typically get our monsoon rains, but that also comes with lightning, thunder, where sometimes I have to shut down or it knocks the tower out. I think we do have some fires starting from lightning strikes several miles to the west of us, but so far nothing here. So it was clouding up and building, but I don't see any lightning yet.
Well, hopefully you'll be spared the calamity that goes with all that. Derinda, you are a multi-talented. We could, if we had an hour, I don't know if we could cover it all. I guess we'll just have to have you come back when your book comes out, or whenever God leads you this way. We'll keep the light on for you, Derinda. We'd love to have you back. I think we're having I call it a package deal. There's certain people that when you see one, you see the other. But Christy Lou will be appearing on our program in the near future.
She is great. She is the narrator for my newer books. I have 2 other audiobooks, books from first series narrated by others, but once she did the accents for my Colorado Treasure historicals, I thought, I got to keep this lady. She's good. So,
I
yeah,
have been
she's a
watching with great
blessing.
interest her old, what is it, Old Leaning Barn episodes.
Oh, yeah.
For the
Yeah.
most
The
part,
old,
but she is, well, I worked in radio, and she has an amazing voice, and it's a trained voice, and she has a vast understanding of inflection and amplitude and modulation and all the stuff that goes into that. And it's amazing to see what one can do when you just commit yourself to learning a craft and just immerse yourself in it. And I think that's, if we are going to serve in the kingdom of God, we are commanded actually to work as unto the Lord and not as unto human masters. And when I see some of the work and hear some of all the details of what you do, and I look at Christy Lou and so many others that we are blessed to work with, I have a great deal of respect for their deference to that command and obedience unto that command. And you're an example of it. Derinda, it's been a real fun time. It's easy to talk to you, and there's so many subjects. It just makes my job so easy. We appreciate you stopping by and sharing with us, but I don't want to hold you up from meeting your deadline of August 1st. So get back to work, and we look forward to book 3 when it comes out. And when that happens, we hope you'll come share with us about that.
I will. That sounds like a plan.
All right. Thank you, Derinda Babcock, here on pjnet.tv. What an interesting night it's been. What a glorious night. Folks, we've got some good players on the Kingdom team, don't we? And speaking of that, tomorrow night, I want to give you a little preview. Christy Lou has a good voice. I may not always. Carla Pollard is one of our regular PJNet team players. She appears once a month. She'll be with us tomorrow night, and oddly enough, she will be talking about a topic that is dear to my heart: teamwork. How can we as Christians work as a team in support of one another? I mean, face it. That'll be, so I want you to make your plans to be here. And following that, we will have another of our regular monthly people, J.D. Winninger. And I want you to read J.D. Winninger's blog because he's so easy to introduce, but this week is different. And if you want a preview of the difference that you're going to hear from J.D., it's not going to be your typical J.D. Go to jdwinninger.com and read his most recent blog, as I will have done by the time we meet again. But he did call me and tell me about it. In fact, he wanted to kind of check in. Bless his heart. Such respect I have for him, because he has respect for me, because he wanted to just give me a heads up and give me the opportunity to say, well, maybe that's not best. But I promise you that it bears, it bears God's seal of approval. That's what's really important, isn't it? We hope that you'll make your plans to join us. Before we leave and shut down for the night, I want to encourage you to do as I have done often, and it's helped me, and it's really just ask yourself 2 questions. Here's the first one. What is the boldest thing that you've ever done in the kingdom of Christ? Question number 2. How long ago was that? And the challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.